Welcome to the debate. Today we're tackling probably the single biggest anxiety for anyone learning a language, that moment a native speaker opens their mouth and just starts talking at full speed.
It's the panic moment, isn't it? Do you try to catch every single word, or do you just let it wash over you and hope you get the gist?
Exactly. And so we are debating the mechanism of listening comprehension. Specifically, does the question-answer method, where you get a list of questions before you listen, does it actually help you understand, or does it just train you to pass a test?
Well, it's the difference between dissecting a frog and watching one jump. I'm arguing that obsessing over specific questions, it just kills the natural flow of language. It turns a story into a scavenger hunt for data.
And I'm arguing that without that scavenger hunt, you aren't listening. You're just hallucinating. You need structure. You need what the Hong Kong Polytechnic University research calls metacognitive strategies. If you don't know what you're looking for, you won't find anything.
I just don't see it that way. Real listening is survival. It's immersion. But, okay, go ahead. Make the case for the checklist.
All right. Let's look at the Thomas scenario used in the IngVid materials. For those who haven't seen it, the teacher, Alex, he sets up a story about a guy named Thomas. But before he says a single word of the story, he writes 3 questions on the board. How old is he? What is his job? And what does he want to do?
The cheat sheet?
It's not a cheat sheet. It's a filter. The brain is about to get hit with just a wall of noise. By knowing we need 32, accountant, and drive across Canada, the brain engages in what's called selective attention. The research shows that effective listeners, they prime themselves. They filter out the garbage so they can catch the signal.
But you're filtering out the humanity. You're listening for 32, so you stop listening to Thomas. In that same lesson, there's a bonus question that isn't written on the board.
Which was?
What was his childhood dream? And the answer is that he wanted to be a soccer player. Now, if I'm an effective listener by your definition, I'm scanning for accountant in Canada. I would treat that soccer detail as noise, but that detail tells me Thomas gave up on his dreams. It tells me he's a practical man who maybe regrets his choices. I mean, that is the soul of the story.
I think you're romanticizing it. We aren't trying to be Thomas's therapist. We're trying to understand his biographical data. If a student catches the soccer detail but misses that Thomas is an accountant, they have failed the communicative task. They don't know what he does.
But they know who he is. And that's the problem with the question and answer model. It prioritizes data points over what the BBC discussion calls connected speech. You get students who can pass a multiple choice quiz but can't hold a conversation because they're just waiting for keywords instead of following the narrative arc.
That's a nice sentiment, but let's up the stakes. Narratives aren't just about feelings. They're about specific cultural markers. Take the Tina's birthday scenario.
Right, the little girl.
Okay, so the teacher gives us a question. What game did they play? The answer is Go Fish. Now, Go Fish is a specific North American cultural reference. If you are just immersing yourself in the flow, you might hear card game or just gloss over it entirely. But the question, it forces you to identify the specific vocabulary. It forces you to engage with the culture.
Sure.
Okay, so you got the name of the card game. But did you catch the breakfast?
That wasn't on the test.
Exactly. And that's my point. The story details that her father got up early to make waffles with strawberries and chocolate sauce. That specific sensory detail is what anchors the memory. The research talks about elaboration, connecting new info to what you already know. Everyone knows what a waffle smells like. That's how you build a neural pathway. But your method, it trains the student to ignore the waffles because breakfast isn't question number 2.
I'm not saying ignore the waffles. I'm saying that if you are so distracted by the chocolate sauce that you miss where Tina wanted to go, her grandparents' house, then you haven't understood the plot. You've just caught a vibe. The question and answer structure ensures that the core narrative beats, the who, the where, the what, are secured.
But it's an artificial security. Real life doesn't come with a menu of questions before a conversation starts.
Actually, it often does. I mean, if I go to a bank, I have a preset list of questions in my head. If I go to a doctor, I'm listening for specific diagnoses. That is strategy area C from the academic guide, planning before you listen.
A bank transaction is different from understanding a complex human conflict. And I think if you look at the Adam scenario, this is where your method really starts to break down.
I disagree completely. I think this is where it shines.
Adam is being bullied. It's a dark story. He's not allowed to finish his lunch.
And the question asks specifically, what didn't they allow him to do?
Right.
That question is crucial. It forces the listener to confront the severity of the bullying. It's not just kids being mean, it's physical deprivation. And the follow-up question regarding the principal, what was his excuse, forces you to catch that exact phrase, kids being kids.
See, I think the question actually shields you from the reality of it. You're looking for the phrase finish lunch. You write it down, you get a check mark. But the BBC sources, they discuss how fluency requires empathy and confidence. The real comprehension here isn't the lunch, it's the lazy explanation of the principle. You need to hear the dismissal in the narrator's tone. You need to feel the injustice to understand why the family eventually moved schools.
But lazy explanation is a critical judgment. How can a student possibly make that judgment if they haven't first understood the facts? You can't analyze the tone if you don't know what happened. The question and answer format provides the scaffold. It says, focus here, this part matters. Without that, a learner facing a story about bullying might just hear angry voices and, well, panic.
Oh, they might relate to the struggle because it's a universal human experience. They might not catch the word lunch, but they understand the conflict. When we rely on these questions, we are training students to be ineffective listeners, the very kind the research warns against, who stop listening the moment they hear the answer they need. They get the data, and they tune out.
They don't tune out, they conserve cognitive energy. The PolyU study notes that students struggle immensely with accents and speed. They are essentially drowning in data. The questions are the life raft.
I'd argue they are shackles. And if you want to talk about tools, look at the shadowing technique mentioned in the NPR piece. You mimic the speaker. You copy their timing, their pauses, their emotion. You can't do that if you're busy filling out a worksheet.
Shadowing is great for pronunciation, sure, but it doesn't test comprehension. You can parrot back a sentence in a language you don't even know. The NPR source also suggests vocab grabber and using transcripts. That is text-based support. It confirms that seeing the words, anchoring the sound to the definition, is how we learn.
It's how we learn vocabulary, maybe, but it's not how we learn to listen. Listening is an act of surrender. You have to let the speaker lead you. And when you impose your questions on their story, you aren't really listening to them. You're just checking your own boxes.
And if you don't check the boxes, you walk away with waffles and soccer, but no idea that Thomas is a miserable accountant or that Adam had to change schools. You have fragments, not facts. The question and answer methodology isn't about passing a test, it's about verifying reality.
And I say it's about limiting reality to what fits online. We want students to feel confident, like Adam eventually did. That confidence comes from understanding the whole messy story, not just the parts that have a question mark attached to them.
I suppose we're going to have to leave it there. I still want the map.
And I'll take the terrain.
That's the debate.